Yeah. Are you concerned about that?
About Taiwan?
Yeah.
Yes, is the answer. Because I think Xi looks at what's happening in Ukraine, and he probably thinks, all right, that's Russia, small GDP equal to a European country, small European country. He looks at China and says, okay, is the West really going to, go into a proxy war over Taiwan? And I think their calculation is probably no. So I think from their perspective, it's a matter of time. And they're probably calculating, can we do this in a slow, sort of soft war way, where we just cede the ground and eventually we have Taiwan, much like, with Hong Kong, where we eventually we look and go, oh, Hong Kong, right? It used to be a bastion of democracy in that little spot. And they put the squash on that. So, I think that's a real problem. And I think Xi views this as important to do during his time, right? I don't think he's going to want to leave that on the table and not have that as part of his legacy, right? So I think the timeline has been accelerated, and it may well be that the timeline is essentially how long does Xi view himself in power? So I think that's a problem. But, do we honestly believe that we're going to put boots on the ground in Taiwan to fight the Chinese regime? I don't think so. So what does that mean? Right? Do we just? It's a problem. But I don't know that we're overly focused right now. We tend to do one thing at a time. As a government. Right now, the thing is Ukraine.
What is the difference between the way that Taiwan operates their government and the way China would operate it if they took over?
Well, part of it's access, right? And given Taiwan's importance in sort of in the tech sector, their chip manufacturing and that would create potentially another real bind in the supply chain system, right? For future use. Right, you have to think about down the road. If we got into a major conflict with China at some point, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to stop anything they can, right? That would help us, right? So their ability to restrict the importation of chips necessary for much of our economy now in terms of running, that's a sort of a key point. That's more of a practical economic issue, right? Then you've got the issue of, well, look, it's a democracy, right? Are we just going to let another democracy get rolled by the communist government? That sounds like an old 1960s Cold War theory, but the reality is our values and what we think important, right, say one thing. The realities of how that would play out say something else, right? So again, it's hard to marry those up. How far would we go down the road to protect Taiwan? And so maybe what that means is, down the road we need to be better at, manufacturing on our own. We got to bring things back, which is part of what's all that talk about onshoring and bringing manufacturing back. Well, that's part of it. Underlying that is our concern over national security issues. Should they get, control of more commodities, whatever you want to refer to. Well,
that was one of the more shocking things about the pandemic was when you realize how dependent we are on China for medicine, for chips, for so many different things that they produce that we don't produce over here. And, how did we allow that to happen? And did we just allow that to happen because there's higher profit margins and we put the entire country at risk because of that? I
think it was, we got addicted to cheap stuff. Yeah. Right. Both, cheap stuff and high tech cheap stuff. So listen to me. Boy, that's a smart fella there. And so I think that was part of it was it at the time it made sense, right? And we didn't imagine at the time. Look, we had the opening of our relationship with China, and it was going to be a new day, right? We went through that with the Cold War, right? And we finished the Cold War. The wall fell, and suddenly we were all like, "Oh, there's got to be a peace dividend here," right? we keep repeating the same mistakes. We came out of World War II, as an example. This may not be the best example, but we came out of World War II. At the time, we had the Office of Strategic Services, which was the predecessor to the CIA. So World War II ends, and like the next day, Truman says, "Thanks very much. Now close the doors on the OSS." Right? Sent Bill Donovan home. Don't let the screen door hit your ass on the way out. And they shut it down because they imagined, that's it. Well, why do we possibly need this organization that's, out there doing special operations and gathering intelligence? And, we won. And so they stopped it. And then the Soviets went on the march. And suddenly they were like, okay, fuck it, maybe we need it. So they started the CIA. Right? And that's the lesson that should have been learned from there, was you're always going to need an intel apparatus that helps support national security concerns. So there was that. Then we had the opening of a relationship again with China, and I think there was this imagining that suddenly things were different, right? We're gonna grow, and that really the entire interconnectedness of our economies just blew up at that point. It really expanded, and so we maybe didn't see exactly what their plans and intentions, motivations were, and we always mirror our values, right? So, we imagine everybody's marching towards democracy, and that's not how it works. So I think that's in part how we ended up in this situation. But now there's more effort and more understanding, I think, to go ahead and onshore and be more concerned about the supply chain. And you're right, the pandemic pointed that out. Right, pretty clearly, and I think maybe that helped accelerate the process. But it's going to take years. Look, it takes years just to do the simple things, right? We talked about the mining issue and critical minerals and the things that we need to lessen our dependence on China's control over critical minerals. You're talking about 6, 8, 9, 10 years, right, to get a mine open in the U.S., right? So. You think down the road, we better, I guess my point is we better accelerate our ability to do this, right? Just to be pragmatic. Maybe, hopefully one day we're all holding hands and everybody's singing Kumbaya and, unicorns are flying out our ass. But I think it's probably not going to happen.